think I wanted to kind of start with the most recent news. Yesterday the administration released some sweeping plans for how it will control Venezuela's oil industry, and which the U.S. says it will quote unquote selectively roll back sanctions as it begins to put its oil back on the market. Do you have any thoughts about, these new plans are? I mean, there are very few details given, but do you have any insight into how this blockade could begin to be dismantled?
Yeah, do I have some comments about that? The challenge that particularly the industry, when I still talk in the last 48 hours to a lot of my Houston contacts, is that we don't know what the rules of the game are going to be. There's a meeting tomorrow in Washington between the Secretary of Energy and a number of executives of the oil companies. And I already know or I'm privy to some of the questions. There's a lot of questions that are going to be put on the table, which we know for a fact that they don't have an answer for it. We are working with an administration in Washington that works out of ideas, and they throw the idea out in the open, and then hope for something to come out of it. There is very little follow through, very little. Okay, this is the strategy. This is how we're going to execute it. This is your role. I mean, none of the things that we learn, both in academic background and also with the companies that I work in, are going on. So there's a lot of question marks. Uh, First of all, most oil in the world, with very few exceptions, those are mineral reserves, belong to the state. They don't belong to a particular country. So all of the subsoil, whether they're mineral rights in oil, mineral rights in gold, in nickel, in copper, you name it, throughout the world, recognized by international law, recognized by the United Nations, belong to the state. We can go into another conversation later on. The only exception is the US, and I'll go into that in a minute.
Hmm.
So the mineral rights of Venezuela, whether we like the government that today is managing the resources, is good or bad or whatever, belongs to the Venezuelan people. Just like the mineral rights in Mexico and Peru and Ecuador and Colombia and Brazil and so on. Uh, so that's the way that it's operated for years.
Hmm.
The oil companies then would sit down with PDVSA, who is the national oil company of Venezuela and who manages those reserves. And we would sit down with PDVSA and said, listen, we're interested in this following region. So we would like a concession. And this happens again in Mexico, in Peru, in Ecuador, in everywhere. So the national oil company will give the oil company, the international oil company, a concession. And that concession is, okay, you have so many square kilometers in this area of the jungle or somewhere offshore, and you have 3 to 5 years to develop it. Bring your geologists in, start drilling some oil wells, find out what's there, and then at your own risk, you either discover oil or not. If you discover oil, then you go into what is called a production sharing agreement. And that is when basically you sign a contract with the state oil company, and you have, let's say, a 40-60 split, which is the one that Chevron has that now, which 40% of the production belongs to you, 60% belongs to the state. So that's the scenario of where actually Venezuela is today, vis-a-vis Chevron. Chevron has a concession in 3 oil fields. They operate those 3 oil fields under a license from the United States today. And 40% of the production comes to the US. 60% of that production goes back to PDVSA. But we have very confusing messages from Washington when it says, well, the oil is ours.
Hmm.
Well, no, sorry, the oil is not yours. The oil reserves on the ground belongs to the state, it's the national patrimony.
Hmm.
But Mr. Trump says, no, that oil is mine. We understand that he does have some sort of control um, for those barrels that are floating in storage. In other words, there's a number of offshore tankers that are full of oil that because of the embargo, or the blockade are sitting there, and also they have a bunch of oil in the tanks onshore that continue to build up because remember, production is running, and they have to get it out, and that's why the what 20 to 50 million barrels of oil that, according to Mr. Trump, PDVSA is quote giving it to us. So everybody
So
needs to
do
move
you
that.
think that the Trump administration might have a better claim, better legal claim on the oil that's sitting in those storage tankers versus what's still in the ground?
Sure. Yeah. I think if the odds, if they would go to a quote unquote court of law, which they're not going to do, because it's again, I'm trying very hard to avoid Brandon uh, labels that will show my politics. I have to be extremely objective in what I say. But again, you have an administration and you have a president that dictates through tweets and messages of things that he's going to do. And as long as there is not a legal challenge, you and I have to accept that he's going to do it and it's going to happen. We're all extremely surprised that he removed Maduro. But the rest of the Chavista organization is in place. There are still political
Mhm.
prisoners. The police is out in the streets still, putting people in jail if they protest. The rest of the leadership from Maduro is still in charge. The head of the Secret Service is still there. The head of the, I mean, so they remove the persona, but the system's still there. And that's the system, quote unquote, political system with which he's negotiating and dealing with. So the answer to your question is, it's a bullying type of positioning that yes, that he's going to win as long as no one challenges him, either in the international court of law, or even if they challenge him or they challenge the U.S. in an international court of law, who's going to execute the decision of the court? What is Holland?
Yeah.
You know, the International Court of Law is in The Hague in Holland. Is the Holland going to send their armada? I don't know how many ships Holland has to intercede the U.S. Gerald D. Ford. And so, yes, right now it seems that the government of Venezuela, the Chavista government of Venezuela, has agreed with Mr. Trump, and they're going to send to the U.S. the 30 to 50 million barrels of oil, most of that which is sitting in sanctioned tankers out in the high seas, plus barrels that they have in storage. By the way, that's good news for everyone because that allows now the production pipeline to continue to move.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was taught during my first week at Shell, you never shut down an oil well. We don't care what mistakes you make, but you never shut down an oil well because once you lose the original pressure of the well, it is hell to get it back. So whatever you do, keep that oil flowing. Don't ever shut down a well.
Okay, so now that this flow can sort of become is coming back online, when do you think, the US Gulf Coast can begin to see some of these shipments to those refiners?
Well, uh, now wait a minute. That something changed here a week before, day before yesterday. Before he said that that oil had to come to the U.S. Now that oil doesn't no longer has to come to the U.S. That oil can be sold in the international market.
Yes.
The revenues from that oil are going to come to the to the U.S. Treasury. That I tell you, I know where that came from. That came from a lot of the oil companies that already we have huge contracts with Canada. 60% of our imports today are from Canada, and Canadian crude is very similar to Venezuelan crude. It's heavy crude. I
Hmm.
ran refineries for 6 years of my career, and refinery planning is 90 days ahead. So all refiners in the US today already know how much oil, what's the quality, from where they're going to run for the next 90 days. So there's no way that all of a sudden we tell the Canadian, stop, shut the pipelines down. You know, the Keystone pipeline, shut down the Keystone pipeline.
But
That
while they say that yes, this crude will be, reaching the international markets, would you say it's likely that a lot of this will still remain or end up on the US Gulf Coast?
no, I no,
You don't think
I
so?
think Chevron has sold some of the barrels that Chevron has been bringing to the U.S. market for the last since they have had the license. They have been reselling that barrel. They've been running that barrel in Pascagoula, which is Mississippi, where they have their big refinery. They have run some of that crude also in their Houston refinery, and then the rest they have sold it to Phillips, who's taking it to Freeport. They sold some to Valero. They've been selling some of that oil to other folks that had gaps and could fit some of that Venezuelan oil. Uh, but no, that oil has the only outlet. If you really don't want to upset the apple cart, the only outlet for that oil, and you want to recover those revenues as soon as possible, sell them in the open market. Repsol will buy it. Total from France will buy it. Eni will buy it from Italy. Those people have refineries with high conversion capacity that can process, and in the past have processed Venezuelan crude. So move that oil forward, get your money. In other words, sell it to whoever wants to buy it at the right price, at the market price, and then go ahead and deposit that money in your bank account. I think the question that you and I have, to which we don't have an answer, is what is the long-term role that Venezuela oil will have in the marketplace? Is it
Yeah.
really going to back out Canadian crude? By the way, about 5 years ago, the Canadians already figured that something could happen, and you do know they finished building and they have a pipeline from Alberta over to Vancouver. So the Canadians said, "Hey, gringos, if you guys want to shut us down, we're going to find an outlet just in case. And that outlet is going to be India and China." So they do
Yeah.
have a pipeline. I forgot what the capacity of that pipeline is, but they can take some of that oil down the road. If we want to increase our proportion of Venezuelan crude, the only crude that can back out is going to be Canadian. Some of that crude, then Canada can go ahead and move it to the Pacific market.
Well, yeah, while we're on that topic, I mean, do you find it somewhat ironic that U.S. intervention in Venezuela leads to Canada trading with China?
Brandon, those, I mean, you and I we did. I don't know if you ever done it at BP and also at Shell. We play games. They're called scenario games or future mapping games, in which you get a bunch of people in a room, and it's the dominoes effect. You start saying, okay, what if this happened? And you come with their options, and you work all type of weird scenarios and how we will handle this. Uh, right now, people that are doing that, and I know that there are people today, as you and I speak, that are running all of these scenario planning and future mapping exercises, don't have the slightest idea what the end result is going to be.
Right. Okay.
I mean, as long as you have, the conversation with Houston the other day was that after the meeting on Friday, I guess it's tomorrow, the oil companies have to sit down with somebody, their counterpart, either a Venezuelan counterpart or a U.S. counterpart, and they're going to have to agree on commercial terms and conditions. What is the legislation? What is the regulation? Does the National Assembly of Venezuela has to approve this deal? I mean, major oil companies, uh, Brandon, are not going to invest billions and billions of dollars with no sort of contractual or commercial agreement. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. So that's going to take at least a year. And then the rebuilding of Venezuela is going to take easily 3 to 5 years. You have 61 oil fields in the Orinoco Basin. You have over 3,000 oil wells in the Orinoco Basin. You have over 600 kilometers of pipeline from the Orinoco Basin to the coast. We don't know the state in what those assets are like and the repair that those assets have to go through. So it's going to be billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And then I need a contract that's going to allow me, Shell, Exxon, whatever, to recover those investments. By the way,
Yeah.
production sharing contracts are usually 25 to 30 years long.
So if we're looking at the degree to which oil production could, be boosted back up in the short term. Yesterday, the Energy Secretary Wright said that Venezuela could boost its oil production by several 100,000 barrels per day in the near term. Is that a feasible target?
Yeah, I mean they went from 770,000 before Chevron got its license. And thanks to Chevron, they went ahead and increased it to their number today. And the most recent OPEC number that I saw a couple of days ago was around 990. So let's call it a million barrels.
Mm,
So yes, on the short term, or the year and a half or 2 years that Chevron has had the license from the U.S. to operate its field, Venezuelan total production was able to increase from about 700,000 barrels to a million. So, yes, I'm sure
okay.
they are, you know, screws that you can tighten and things that you can do quickly, and they can probably squeeze out of the system another couple of hundred thousand barrels. But I think that's it.
Yeah. And so then when we're looking back at the long term, like how long would it take for production to reach levels that we last saw during Chavez era?
We don't know because nobody has done an audit of
Yeah.
what the field is like. Let me tell you about another player that nobody talks about. The Halliburtons, the Schlumbergers, the
Yeah.
Baker Hughes. Another lesson from my early days at Shell. Oil companies bring four basic things to the table. They bring capital, they bring money, they got the deep pockets. So the oil company brings the money. The oil companies bring the technology. And the oil company brings also what we call the know-how, how to manage the whole enterprise. But like my boss used to tell me, the service companies, again, the Halliburtons and Schlumbergers and so on, they have the shovels and the wheelbarrows.
Mhm.
Those are the guys that you tell them to drill a well. Those are the guys that build the pipelines. Those are the guys that build the whole infrastructure. So you
So
actually
this
need,
whole enterprise kind of hinges on what they think about moving back into this nation.
correct. I mean, somebody has to go out in the field and start kicking the tires.
Yeah.
I'll say, okay, fine. Yeah, this truck, oh, just a tune up. I'll change two tires and that's fine. The other one is total destroyed. So forget about that truck. By the way, let me give you another one, environmental liability. A lot of these oil well sites are hugely contaminated because of oil spills over the years that the Venezuelans never cleaned up. I'll guarantee you, knowing the Exxons and the Shells and the Conocos of the world, they're not going to assume the liability and the responsibility of cleaning up
Mhm.
that pollution from those sites. They're going to run away. They say, nope, somebody else spilled it, somebody else this damage. I'm not going to do that. So you also have the environmental risks. Who's going to assume the liabilities and the exposure of environmental risk, environmental pollution, not only to the subsurface, but also to the water table throughout the Cuenca del Orinoco.
Right. Okay, so lots of, obvious barriers that we've all kind of have learned over this past week. And when this news first hit, and in the week subsequent, we saw WTI and Brent prices virtually unchanged.
Right.
And in the meantime, we saw share prices of U.S. majors and of these service companies that you're talking about shoot up a bit. So, I mean, I guess from a 1,000 foot level, is this a major flashpoint in the global energy market, or is this maybe more of just the White House flexing its muscles in a way that will have minimal impact on the market overall?
You also have gasoline retail prices going down. So to those four or five
Yeah,
things that the other uh, is the retail gasoline prices. Uh, OPEC today is staying out of things. OPEC hasn't said, yes, there's a threat that if Venezuela reaches the 3 million barrel a day level, which is the threshold of what, 1998 or whatever that year was. If they reach the 3 million, uh, by that time, certainly you're going to see. Oh, by the way, they're a member of OPEC.
yeah,
Venezuela is a member of OPEC. So if all of a sudden there are many folks at OPEC, by the way, that love Venezuela to stay the way they are. They don't want Venezuela. They don't want Venezuela to be able to commercialize and monetize their reserves, because
Right.
as you already imagining, that's going to have a downward trend in oil prices. So I don't know. You're going to see OPEC then cutting back production. By the way, Brandon, in that scenario, add countries like Guyana, where Exxon made a major discovery. Add countries like Brazil. Brazil today is producing 4 million barrels of oil a day. So Argentina finally got its Vaca Muerta, its shale program in line, and is increasing production. So right now, there's plenty of oil around the world. That's why you saw prices Brent at $60. That's why you see retail prices going down. But longer term, especially if Venezuela, listen, if Venezuela's fix is quicker and shorter than what we think, I think it's going to be 3 to 5 years. I think people don't
Okay.
have, yeah, I'm not a geologist, I'm not a petroleum engineer, but I can imagine how those sites are. No, I mean, rusty
Yeah.
and broken and what have you. I mean, that's going to take a while to get back on stream.
Well, but before we go into some of those regional neighbors, let's dive a little bit more on into OPEC. As you mentioned, they haven't made any official announcement on it, but I mean, can we maybe begin to speculate on what OPEC's position on this would be?
Their goal, um, by the way, break even. Another conversation that was going on last week. The question was, what is the break even number of oil? Um, we know that offshore deep water Gulf of Mexico, you are talking about 65, maybe as high as $70 a barrel. And some of the shale play in the Permian now is probably under $40 a barrel, again, because of technology advantages and so on. Venezuela is expensive because remember that the oil in Venezuela it's heavy sour and has to be diluted. In fact, you have to inject diluents into the wellhead in order to make the oil viscous enough so that you can pump it out of the ground.
Yeah. Right.
So Venezuelan oil, heavy oil, it's not cheap.
Right.
Some people say that I talked to somebody at Exxon who thinks that it's maybe $40, $50 a barrel for Venezuela to have a break even, number. Remember also that if you look at Brent, Venezuelan heavy is usually $10, $12 off. There's a discount. In other words,
Yeah.
if the marker, we call the marker crude, if the marker is Brent, not WTI, but Brent, even if it is WTI, you're talking about $10, $15 discount
Right.
because you're talking about very bad quality oil.
Right. Right. But bringing it back to OPEC for a moment, um, can like can you project what their response might be to this whole situation, or do you think they'll just kind of play it mum for the time being?
They want to maintain the current status quo on oil
Yeah.
prices. They don't want oil prices to collapse. By the way, they don't want oil prices either to people think that, oh, they want $100 a barrel oil price. No, because that will hurt the consumption of oil. People will start going more to renewables than anything else. So no, no, no. They have a number in their mind, and I think that number, based on what we know, it's somewhere where it is today. That 60, $65 a barrel, a global number for Brent, is one I think that they're satisfied with. Now, if all of a sudden the market starts getting a lot of Venezuelan oil, if the lifting of the sanctions against Russia are effective, and then Russian oil become starts, hey, that wait a minute, that's something we didn't take into consideration. Russian oil right now is basically quote unquote off the market
Yeah.
because of the sanctions, the European sanctions. So if you open up Venezuela, Ukraine, US, Russia come to an agreement, and Russia starts again producing and selling their oil, you're going to have a lot of oil in the marketplace, which are going to it's going to depress prices. And then you're going to see OPEC coming in and says, whoa, 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 wait a minute. I'm going to cut production. I'm the producer. So we gotta maintain the oil prices around $60 a barrel.
And so, what do you think Venezuela's status as a member state of OPEC will be going forward if it's under U.S. control?
I think you can say, I never thought of this. You can say that the US is not a member of OPEC,
Right. Oh, yeah.
right? Ooh, that's a good one. I never thought of that one. Play that one up in whatever you're going to write. I mean, basically, if the US really controls the oil industry in Venezuela, therefore it can control production.
Hmm.
And
Creates its own
if
cartel.
they're still, and therefore they're a member of OPEC. The US is a by de facto, the US is a member of OPEC through Venezuela's membership.
Or by de facto, Venezuela ends its membership with OPEC because of the situation.
You
Yeah,
can
I
play.
mean,
No,
like,
this is a chessboard. You can move any piece. You can move it anywhere you want.
yeah, okay. Okay, let's go back into sort of the regional picture. Um, maybe you can kind of talk about how important Venezuela is to the regional economy, and have there been reactions from Venezuela's oil producing neighbors, Colombia, Guyana, Ecuador, even Mexico? I know that they've pushed back or against the actions, but any sort of forecast into what strategies they could adopt in this new sort of paradigm?
No, I'm sure, Brandon, that their thought and thinking is what's going to happen to my oil, the demand for my oil, and the price of my oil if and when Venezuela reaches a level of production of, let's just guess, 2 million barrels a day. So that's what they're worried about. In other words, that production is going to eat into their market. And if you
Yeah,
remember back in the 70s, uh, that's why Citgo became Citgo. Why did Venezuela buy a U.S. refinery? Because they wanted to guarantee an outlet for their crude, regardless of what the price was. So you're going to see a lot of companies, and in fact, I'll bet you they're already thinking about how am I going to behave in the marketplace if Venezuelan oil starts really coming into the market sooner than we all think. That's going to have a negative impact on me,
yeah.
on Colombia, on Ecuador, and all of those net exporters.
So they'll begin to face some stiffer competition as they try and export to US.
That's already been played with Guyana. Guyana is already at 1 million barrels a day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, are there any ways they could be, shifting their export strategies to other markets outside of the Western Hemisphere?
Which they are already. They're a big supplier to China. They're a big supplier to Colombia as well as
Yeah.
Brazil and those folks. But remember here that we're talking about is a, a, a grade of oil that has limited refining capacity or limited conversion capacity in the world. Colombian Caño Limón, offshore Brazil, Ecuador Oriente, even Pemex Olmeca and Pemex Isthmus, all of those crudes can be run in most places of the world. But Venezuelan extra heavy crude, you can
Mm.
only run it in those refineries like US refineries that have high conversion capacity to process the worst barrel in the world and take out of it the last drop of clean product, whether it's gasoline or diesel. And those refineries are limited. Some European refineries, yeah, China has some of them, but not every single country in the world has the conversion capacity
Yeah.
that the US has.
So what is the U.S. capacity for refining Venezuelan oil, and how does that compare to China's or any other country that might have that as well?
I have to get you the numbers, but I know that our conversion capacity is about 70%, which is very, very high. So, we have the cokers and we have the heavy oil crackers. Uh, it's funny. That's when I just came in from, I went to the University of Florida, but when I arrived from Gainesville in New Orleans, that's when the oil companies were talking among themselves and saying, world production is becoming heavier and heavier and heavier. And we're used to running light sweet crudes from Nigeria, from North Africa, West Texas Intermediate, but that diet is changing, and they made a decision, they being the big boys, in starting building. I remember many people criticized the oil companies. What are you guys doing building all this heavy conversion capacity when you don't need it? They didn't need it then, but they needed it 5 or 10 years later when all of a sudden we started discovering heavy oil.
Hmm.
And today, the investments that were questioned back in the 70s uh, now are pay. Listen, the worse the oil, the cheaper the oil, the more we like it. When I was with Amoco, we love Guatemalan crude. There's a little production in Guatemala. I hope, oh, you're taping this, so I can't speak in the language that I would like to speak. We used to call it that it was oil caca de oil.
Yeah.
It was awful. We loved it. Why? Because we bought it for $10 a barrel or $9 a barrel or whatever. And a refinery in Texas City will love it. They will run that stuff all day long.
Okay.
So, there's only so many refineries and so many companies in the world that can process um, that heavy oil, which is cheap and at the same time it's expensive to produce. So figure that one out.
Yeah. And that global capacity mostly resides in US and China, is what you're saying. There's
Right, and
no.
some refineries in the Spain and in the South Coast, they have a couple of cokers. So yes, there is a limited. I'll send you this study. There is a report by Eni, the Italian oil company, that shows all the. In fact, it shows a map with all the countries in the world that have the high conversion refinery capacity. I'll make a note of that and I'll send it to you.
Okay. 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 Well, let's maybe look into Guyana for a moment. Maybe you can talk about what the implications this has for Guyana's oil fortunes. And in addition, what does it mean for the maritime boundary dispute that Guyana has with Venezuela?
Um, I tell you, that would be a nice research project for somebody at UT. I haven't seen, I tell you, if the Energy Institute would get a couple of folks and put out a report on uh, resource management, the resource management that Guyana faces. You have a country that is what, 900,000 people who are now making money, hand over fist. Uh, thank God that is Chevron. I mean, I'm sorry, Exxon, which we would guess and assume that corruption is at a minimum. I'm not telling you that, that there is zero corruption,
Hmm.
but the Exxons of the world know how to manage corruption issues. Um, how is that country going to manage those resources for the benefit of their people now and for generations to come? Are they going to do like Norway that set up this huge investment fund early on that's still generating ton of money for the country, even after Norway runs out of oil and gas? Um, so no, that is the question is that there are a lot of organizations from the World Bank to major oil companies, everybody is trying to help Guyana on how to manage their resources.
Hmm.
And that they are very, very careful that don't happen like Pemex, that decided to start pumping oil for the sake of pumping oil, and they damage their reservoirs to a point that the extraction ratio, the recovery ratio of the reservoirs just drop because they tried to get out of it so quickly just to get more money that they messed up the long-term production cycle of the reservoirs.
Hmm.
Um, Most of that business today, the management it's Exxon. We have to start finding the way of turning that management over to local people. We have to
Hmm.
train the local folks. I know that Exxon has a program like we used to have at Shell, which is to take those people, select your 10, 15, 20 engineers and economists, and ship them out of Guyana, send them to either the US or a bunch of other countries, and put them out there to work for 5 years. And once they gain that experience of working in Norway or working in Algeria, then bring it back uh, to the country. And those are going to be your future executives and management of your oil business.
Do
Um,
you perchance foresee that maybe, the Chevrons in Venezuela doing similar things as the U.S. intervention there kind of grows?
Somebody told me, which by the way, uh, let's look for it, that Chevron on their website was already advertising for people.
Oh,
Um, yeah, the when I was an expat, both in Madrid and in Mexico, the policy of the companies at that time was to minimize the expat. Expats are very expensive, um, and to start creating a cadre of nationals that we could trust and put in charge. Nationals that all of a sudden, in their behavior and mindset, were not Mexicans or Colombians, but they were Exxon or Shell. In other words, remember, what you're doing is you're putting now in charge in this country of folks that are also nationals. And so, who do they favor? Do they favor the oil company that they work for, or do they favor the nation of who they're a citizen of?
hmm.
Um, so, it's there's a term that is very wrong. It's not used anymore. And but there is a term in the industry in the old days when one of your employees, quote unquote, went native. Uh, Basically, that they turn on the corporation, and they took the argument side. They have to go to the table and negotiate with the host country. And Chicago or New York was telling you to, we want more, we want more. It was very difficult to them to ask for more, sitting across the table another national
Mm,
who was telling you, hey, we need this money to build schools.
right, right, right.
So anyway, so yes, the challenge for Venezuela, as the challenge today for Ecuador and Peru and a bunch of other countries, find the cadre of national employees and national managers that have the experience and the commitment to rebuild the oil industry for the benefit of the nation.
Okay, and so what about the maritime border dispute between Venezuela and Guyana? And, the Guyanese side was obviously backed by Exxon, now Venezuelan under U.S. and super major control. Do you think this might alter the trajectory of that
No,
dispute?
I think it's interesting. That's two things in this conversation that you just came up with that I haven't thought of. Um, Now is the time. If I'm Exxon, which is a U.S. company, I will talk to Trump personally, and I would say, "Listen, let me tell you about what this problem that we have." And if Mr. Trump picks up the phone and if he really controls Venezuela, like he says, Venezuela should be signing for the second time a maritime border agreement with Guyana,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I mean, if he has the influence, if he has the bully effect still with him, it's for him to call Miss Rodriguez or whatever her name is and say, "Listen, I need you to sign an agreement with Guyana whereby you agree on the border."
Interesting. Yeah, you can see that playing out that way.
I mean, if I'm Exxon, I'm already at the White House front door trying to get in.
Right, right. Okay. Um, Now maybe we can maybe talk a bit about China. Um, Obviously China has had presence in Venezuela, in the country itself. Do you think China will continue to be involved? and Venezuelan oil industry under American control.
There are two groups that we are questioning what's going to happen. One is Russia, and the other one is China. China's business is twofold with Venezuela. One is all of the money that they loan Venezuela over the years, huge debt that China has with Venezuela, that Venezuela is paying with oil.
Yeah.
So that relationship, you and I would question, or you and I would ask, is that going to continue? Or is Venezuela, or is that something that Mr. Trump will use as a negotiating tool with Mr. Xi uh, to either accelerate the payment of the debt or cut off the debt or something? But there is a debt that Venezuela owes China. The second one is that there are some assets that China has taken over. In fact, I think that one or two of the assets used to belong to Conoco in the old days.
Mm.
So China and then two or three Russian oil companies do have joint ventures with PDVSA. And I'm talking now about assets. So the question that you and I have is what is going to be the position of Washington and the Venezuelan government vis-a-vis those assets? By the
Right.
way, there's something else. I am trying to get a hold of the invitee list for the meeting tomorrow with the
Okay.
Secretary of Energy. Where's Shell and BP in all of this?
Well, they're not American companies.
No, they're not. But they're huge players, and they've been in
Yeah.
Venezuela for a long time, and they're in the US. They have refineries, they have gas stations, they have oil production. But are Shell and BP, and for that matter, Repsol or
Hmm.
Total or any, are they being invited to this conversation? If the
Mm.
United States really controls the oil in Venezuela, this company, like in the past, they always, you know, uh, play a role in the monetization of Venezuelan resources. They need to be at the door also saying, hey, wait a minute, don't forget about me.
Yeah. I mean, great point. Um, I mean, but thinking more about Sinopec there and these JVs and these assets that they have. Um, I mean, could you foresee a scenario where the U.S. takes those over, or some kind of taking kind of majority stake in those, or what's
I,
some
yeah,
possible outcomes for this?
I think it's called Sinovenza, and I have to see where Sinovenza,
Uh,
which is part of the Orinoco assets. I tell you one thing. If I am a Valero, well, Valero is not an exploration company. Valero is refining. But if you are an Exxon or a Conoco or a Phillips, I would stay away from third-party assets. I would rather just go after an asset that used to belong to PDVSA, and try to pick that one up and shape it, and try to run it. Because oh God, no! If I take over the Chinese, now I have the Chinese to deal with too. I don't know what they did. No, 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 no. I tell you one thing, get headaches off my plate. I don't want any. I already gonna have enough problems trying to get more oil out of all of these PDVSA assets that are out there. For me now to start trying to deal with a Chinese or a Russian asset.
right. So some scenario where there's expropriation of Chinese assets is probably not. It's probably unlikely.
No, I think it could happen. I think the other, if you and I if you and I are putting an HEB shopping list together, um, it's yeah, what's going to happen to Chinese and Russia? Or let's put it. Let's not even mention Chinese, whatever. What's going to become to current assets that are co-jointly owned by PDVSA with third parties that are today active? Whether it's Timbuktu or I don't care what the country is or what the national oil company is. I think the Vietnam at one time had something going on. So the question is, what is the position of this government with Venezuela third-party agreements with other countries?
Yeah, though I would imagine that, some countries would be treated differently than others.
There you
Like
go. I mean,
China's, yeah.
if he thinks that he can play, that he can use one of those countries as a chess piece, I don't know, vis-a-vis Ukraine, vis-a-vis Taiwan, oh, he'll use it. I mean, he will certainly use it. So you see, Brandon, I mean, there is a role today in this world that is new to all of us,
Hmm.
and that is government by edict.
Okay, so you mentioned a moment ago Venezuela's debt to China. So kind of begs the question, how will Venezuela begin to service those Chinese debts if it can no longer make those exports to repay those loans?
Yeah,
Is this just another open question that
that's another one. I
there's
mean,
no, yeah.
listen, please don't misunderstand me. You're asking the right questions. Those are the
Yeah,
same
well, I
questions.
wonder though if there's like precedent for these kind of things where that might inform, okay.
Precedents for this administration? Are you kidding? Oh, Mr. President, look what Greenland, look what the Denmark did 50 years ago. Who cares about what they did 50 years ago?
Yeah.
No, no, no. The president is anyway, whatever. Don't get me going.
Do you think that there might be some like implications for Chinese investments, like future investments in Latin America? Would China might just pull back from the region
No, I think
at
it's the other way
large?
around.
Oh,
I would say this is the other way around. If you're losing your biggest foothold in the region, let's assume we'll have to take a look at CSIS, which is a think tank in Washington. I think they put a report on Chinese investments in Latin America. We need to take a look at the foothold that Venezuela represents for the Chinese. By the way, I don't know what the foothold of Venezuela is vis-a-vis critical minerals. I'm assuming that it's also going to be important. So what I'm saying is, if China loses its foothold in what they think is one of their primary areas in the region, which is Venezuela, they're going to then accelerate
hmm.
any relationship or project that they had with Ecuador or with Peru or with Bolivia in the lithium fields, all of that, because boy, I'm going to lose Venezuela. I better hurry up before this thing gets broader and wider and crazier, and the U.S. now goes after Bolivia. So I better hurry up and reset my footprint in the region by taking the space that I lost in Venezuela, increasing that space in other countries.
So this only just is creating opportunity or space for an increased, proxy disputes between the two superpowers in the region. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, are there any silver linings from this for China, other than maybe they're going to accelerate their presence in the region? I mean, who knows how that will play out, but I'm thinking of, in addition to now the Chinese might be able to portray US as a source of instability in the region. Are there other silver linings that they might grab onto?
Um, China is not my expertise. China is not. That's a question that both you and I would have um, to someone. I don't know if we have anybody at UT that would have, you know, Chinese experience on the geopolitics of China in the region. I guess both of you and I know that they're really going after the China Sea, the Philippines, all of that area, which supposedly has a high potential of oil and also subsurface minerals in the open ocean. Um, we know that they're going after. They're certainly staying away from Europe. They're big in Africa. I mean, they're building dams and bridges. Everything they can build in Africa, they're building. Again, to build relationship and rapport and goodwill with African countries. And the same thing in Latin America. They have a little projects here and there. Um, I don't know. I don't know enough about China to really, talk about what the reactions are going to be to all of this.
Okay. All right. Well, so that was generally all the questions I had for you. Is there anything else you think you might want to touch on?
No, I think both you and I don't know where you're going with this, but I think that both you and I still need certainly a couple of weeks for things to settle,
Yeah.
because something new is coming out every single day. Um, and you and I might write an opinion or a probability of something happening, and then all of a sudden, tomorrow we wake up and look at Truth Social or whatever, and some new rule is taking place. Um, we haven't talked about refining. You ought to think about that
Oh,
because
yeah.
Venezuela has the largest inactive refining capacity anywhere in the region.
Hmm.
Um, and the Iranians
Just
running,
sitting inactive, waiting for investment to turn
uh,
it on again.
they have very they have enough units running in Amoy, and I forgot what's the other one, just to supply enough diesel and gasoline for the local markets. Um, but they're huge refineries in Venezuela that are basically shut down. So the question that you and I would have is, it's a Valero, a perfect fit will be for Valero. Valero is actually,
Hmm.
Valero and Marathon are two U.S. oil companies that are, I don't want to say big, because the Chevrons and the Exxons are also big in refining, but their niche is more downstream than upstream.
Yeah.
Um,
Or midstream in this case.
right, or midstream.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's another, enterprise. I mean, you and I can go through a bunch of U.S. pipeline companies that manage the midstream and manage it very well. Um, I, I would see them getting involved in the pipeline sectors of Venezuela. Why
Hmm.
is Exxon or somebody, if any of the 600 kilometers of pipeline from the Orinoco up to Jose, which is the port, has to be rebuilt, let the pipeline companies own that asset. I mean, you don't care. Um,
I mean, so what do you see as the fate of these idled refining assets in Venezuela, which I assumed are presently state-owned? Um, could these be? Are you saying that there's opportunity for the Valeros, the Marathons, to step in and start intervening in that sector in the same way that the Chevrons and Exxons have intervened in the upstream?
yeah, Valero got out of you today have four major big refineries that have been shut down for 10 years. You have the one in San Croix that used to belong to Hess. You have the one in Curacao that used to belong to Shell. You have Aruba, who used to be owned, I think, by Valero. And then I'm missing one. So you had Aruba, Curacao, San Croix. I forgot what the other one is. These are major refineries that are inactive. They're mothballed. They're shut down. Um, Refining business is very difficult. I grew into the refining sector, um, and it's expensive. Margins are very thin. Um, it's not a good business. A lot of people are getting out of it. Um, so anyway, question mark then is that both the pipeline, the midstream, and the downstream refining assets of Venezuela, are they available? And would U.S. companies or international companies be interested in any of those assets? I think that's another question mark that we have.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe the last point we can end on is, you mentioned that, there's this sort of roster of companies that will be present during the White House meetings tomorrow. And so we're looking for to see if included on that roster are the Shells and the BPs of the world. Um, what do you expect? the outcome of these meetings to be? What kind of progress do you think, what kind of clarity do you think might be shed from nothing?
No, that meeting again, and don't laugh. This is what seriously is going to be. If I understood what somebody was telling me from Houston, is they're gonna walk into the room with a shopping list on their hand, and they're gonna give it to the secretary, and they're gonna say, "You want us to invest in Venezuela? You want us to rebuild it? Okay, here it is, and a list." Which the answer is not going to be at that time. There's a list of the terms and conditions that international companies would like to have by the national oil companies in order for them to invest. And it takes years. No, sorry. It takes months for that conversation and those negotiations to take place. I mean, that's
Do
something.
you think that maybe what, on that list of requests, could be U.S. subsidization of these
I'm sorry,
projects? Could be U.S. subsidization?
U.S. I don't.
Essentially, U.S. tax dollars helping these majors
Oh,
rebuild in Venezuela.
no, no, supposedly the, according to the remarks that I have heard, one of the interviews that he gave on the airplane coming back from Palm Beach, from Mar-a-Lago was, no, the U.S. taxpayer is going to pay zero. The oil companies have plenty of money. That's why he wants the oil companies no more share buyback. That's why he doesn't want any more dividends because he thinks that both dividends payments and the share buyback money ought to come back into the corporation so they can invest it either in the
Mm.
U.S. or they can invest it in Venezuela or somewhere else. So no. I don't think there's not going to be any government. Well, I don't know. I would expect. I don't think that there will be any government subsidies or help to the oil companies to to rebuild the Venezuelan oil industry.
But if the outlook for oil prices remains sort of kind of below the break-even point at where it is now, and it's not really going to incentivize them, in maybe a medium-term basis to actually step in there, how is Trump going to actually actualize this agenda if there's no movement?
Yeah, Brandon, remember, oil companies today are not working on that $60 Brent. That $60 Brent doesn't have an impact on their overall financial position of the corporation. It has an impact on the retail volume that they sell at the pump. But what the oil companies are working on is what I used to work in was okay, let's build the PTA plant in Brazil. And the first question was, okay, what is the price of, and the question would be, how long will it take you to build that plant? 3 years, okay? And then the question would come from the board or the executive committee, where do you expect the price of polyester to be 3 years from now? Because that's when the plant will be ready to start producing polyester.
Mhm.
So the question that the major oil companies have is where is the price of oil going to be 3, 5 years from now?
Right. Okay.
Because that's when these deals will come through. That's when these deals will be set. That's when these deals will start monetizing production. And now you have a product in your hand that you're ready to sell.
Right. And we just have no forecast for what that
Oh,
long-term
they
outlook would
do.
be.
Oh, they do.
They do. Okay.
Oh, you and I will kill. They already have their numbers. They all have their numbers, and you'll be surprised how often they don't compare numbers, but how often they're very similar. There are people like McKinsey and other folks like that that once in a while they'll produce a report on what the forward projection of development of oil or petrochemicals is. But yeah, oh yeah, they have a number. They know where they think that the price of oil ought to be long term. Long term for them, by the way, is a window of 5 to 7 years
Okay.
because that's how long it will take to build a petrochemical plant or a refinery. What's the price of oil 20 years from now? They could care less.
Yeah.
What's the price of oil tomorrow? Sure, they care because of the retail business. But the main question for them is where is the price of oil going to be in 3, 5, even 7 years, which to
Yeah.
me,
And you said a while ago that you believe that, we won't actually start seeing, some of these investments start flowing until a 3 to 5 year period.
right, you will get, like you said, somebody mentioned, I think in the short term, they're the easy pickings. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
fluke that you can, fix here and there, a couple of wells that you can connect and clean and do, and certainly
Right.
you can increase production by 200, even maybe 500,000 barrels a day. Who knows? I mean, we haven't kicked the tires of the trucks still. That's no
Right.
problem.
Okay.
But if the system is as broken down as we think it is, along the value chain, you can fix all the wells, but if you haven't fixed the pipelines, what good does it do for you to fix the stupid wells if you don't have the pipeline to send the oil? So, how bad is the whole value-added value chain? How bad is it? Maybe it's just a couple of years. Other people will
And
say maybe
and
it's five. I don't know.
the players who will be conducting these audits, are they just going to be each of these majors? Are we going to have any sort of outside consultants who are also
No,
going
yeah,
to,
yeah, but basically is the majors along with the Halliburtons and the
yeah.
Schlumbergers and all. They have enough people. They can put teams together. Sure, they'll bring a couple of consultants from the outside just to write the numbers and to prepare the reports and that sort of thing. But no,
Will
no,
there
no,
be collaboration amongst them in producing this? Is this something that, could ultimately remain, for
no.
public view?
They could be. In fact, that's why you hire a Halliburton or a Schlumberger because those companies work for everybody else.
Yeah.
And they bring the experience of them working in a lot of different places. No, no, I see, in something like this, I do see some degree of cooperation.
Okay, great.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for messing up my Zoom connection that I have to go now and clean.
I don't want to take blame for that, but
That's the
I'm
last
glad we
time
all got it all
I tell you,
sorted.
I see your ID somewhere again. I'll turn it off so quick that your head will spin.
Like I said, next time I'll just knock on your front door and invite myself in.
You got a deal. Okay,
All right.
buddy.
Thank you
Let's
again.
be in touch, okay?
All right. Thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Take care.